Shortly, I am Otis Osbourne, one of the moderators.
Good morning, everyone. I don't like that morning at all. Not because it's raining. Good morning, everyone. All right, that's the spirit. The music. The music. All right, it's a great pleasure to welcome you all to the ICANN Latin American and Caribbean LAC-i Roadshow. This is hosted in partnership with ISOC Jamaica and has been spearheaded by Ms. Chanel McPherson. And we have some special guests here that are here, like Mr. Rodrigo, Mr. Albert Daniels, Mr. Nicholas Anelio. We also have persons from the ministry. We have some stakeholders. We have persons from UE and the e-learning community. I would like to also say thank you all for those persons who are coming from far. So I just like to make special welcome to people like from Spectrum, from Flow, Digicel. We have persons here from the Ministry of Science and Telecommunication and Transportation. We have persons from ITC Pulse. We have from e-learning, I think I said that before. And we also have persons from the Data Protection Office of Jamaica. Okay, so today, while you join us, we'll be discussing a few things. So we promise to be a day of insightful discussion, collaboration, and capacity building. We want to bring to the key stakeholders from across all sectors, whether you're from the technical community, academia, legal experts, government, to share commitment in shaping the future of the internet. As we come together, I'd like us to explore the critical role, especially from the student. I know we have a few students here to play, to explore the critical role that ICANN will play in governance and security, both regional in Jamaica and global. So this roadshow, I promise you, will provide a unique opportunity to engage with fellow experts, deepen your understanding, and contribute in shaping the future of the digital ecosystem. Through collaboration, I think we can ensure that the internet continues to evolve in a way that benefits us all. Thank you for being here. I know that it's raining now, but I really, really would like to thank each and everyone who is here face to face and also online. And we look forward for your contribution to this, especially when we have the panel discussion. So we are looking to unfold a lot of things here, how we can work together to secure and strengthen the internet for a generation to come. And I hope you enjoy the event. So let us make today a meaningful step forward in sharing a shared journey. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Natalie. We will now have Mr. Rodrigo de la Parra to give opening remarks. He's a Stakeholder Engagement Senior Manager for the Caribbean at ICANN.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Great to be here in Jamaica. This is my second time. Last time, the first time in Kingston, really happy to be here with all the good people of Jamaica. Thank you. I want to say my deepest appreciation to the Untitled Chapter in Jamaica. Shout out to two ladies that were instrumental in helping bringing us together, having information Chanel McPherson. Thank you very much, and of course, Natalie Rose, the ISOC chapter in Jamaica, great helpful. I just want to spend with you just 2 or 3 minutes to explain what is that we are doing here, and what is the concept of our roadshow for ICANN. So you will be learning throughout the day. Many of you already know about ICANN and what is that we do. If we want to introduce this organization, we're learning in detail. But there are key principles that I would like you to understand at this moment about ICANN. ICANN is an organization which is based in Canada and is called the Multi-Stakeholder Model. Everybody has that invitation, but it's actually a requirement as well of our organization to be successful. To guarantee that every stakeholder, including of course students, media, government, daily activists, and business, they are all represented and they are making key decisions around the remit of ICANN, which is the management at the global level of what we call the system of unique identifiers. Maybe IDO is a domain name. You'll hear more about this
Check.
more later. But so we need participation from every stakeholder group, and we also need participation from different geographies. In order for ICANN to be a truly global organization representing the interests of everybody, we need to ensure that not only different stakeholders are sitting at the table, but those stakeholders are come from many different places around the world. So in the Caribbean. The other 3 regions are South America, Central America, and the other one is the Andean region. So this is the 2024 edition of the Caribbean stop of the LAC-i Roadshow, and the idea is to bring you the organization to you, to provide some capacity development on how ICANN works, how the DNS, the domain name system works, invite you to participate and also update you about the different topics that are being discussed now. And hopefully by the end of this event, we can continue to be in touch with you and you can continue or start to be engaged with our community. We are here celebrating, of course, many Jamaican members to our community, but particularly these 2 ladies that I mentioned at the beginning of my remarks, Chanel and Natalie. They were both fellows. We have a fellowship program at ICANN. You will learn more about that. but they have been engaged in such a way with ICANN and continue to be engaged with ICANN in such a way that now they have helped us to organize this event. So again, thank you very much for having us here, and I hope that you enjoy the content of the roadshow and ask many questions. So thank you very much again.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Rodrigo. It is now my esteemed pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Mr. Gary Campbell, who is the Director of Technology in the Office of the Prime Minister and Deputy Chair of ISOC Jamaica. Gary Campbell is the Director of Technology in the Skills and Digital Transformation Portfolio in the Office of the Prime Minister. As said earlier, he is also the Deputy Chair of ISOC Jamaica Chapter. At the OPM, his portfolio responsibilities include providing input to national ICT-related policies and strategies, and also technical and policy guidance and advice to the various ministries, departments, and agencies. He chairs several committees, such as the Government of Jamaica's Open Data Committee, which is the oversight body for the government's open data portal, and the Policy Authority for the government's public key infrastructure. Prior to joining central government, he was employed to Life of Jamaica, now Sagicor, the Planning Institute of Jamaica, PIOJ, and Cable and Wireless Jamaica Limited, now Flow. Gary Campbell has over 25 years in information systems development, ICT strategy, formation, ICT project management in both the public and private sectors. He is also an adjunct faculty member at the University of the West Indies and the University of Technology, and has conducted significant research in the areas of open source software and open innovation, and has done several publications in these areas. Please welcome Mr. Gary Campbell, who will be joining us online.
Audio check. Audio check. Are you hearing me, Otis? Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this very significant event. And thank you for that introduction, Otis. So I want to just speak to you briefly in terms of what's happening in the digital landscape in Jamaica. I'll start with a quote from Charles Dickens. As he would have put it, were he around, it is the best of times, it is the worst of times. As the global economy transforms into a digital one, the ability to adopt and leverage digital technologies in all spheres, government and private, will determine the development trajectory of countries in the future. Over the past many revolutions, we could talk about the pre-industrial age, the industrial age, the information age, and certainly the digital age. Technology has served as the engine for human development, but at the same time has largely impacted our way of living. Today is no different. In fact, emerging technologies such as robotics, artificial intelligence, blockchain, cloud, Internet of Things, sensors, and cybersecurity are coming together so quickly that our very nature is being disrupted far beyond the previous ages. We are now amid the fourth industrial revolution, where we call digital singularity. And this is the point where technological omnipresence and the human experience converge. With the disruptive changes we are going through, small island developing states such as Jamaica therefore need to understand that if we are to be positioned to capitalize on the opportunities, we're going to have to unveil with the evolving economy. In so doing, we need to take a comprehensive look at how future digital infrastructure can be made ready, whether we have sufficient base of digital awareness from the citizens, and what thrust we need to put towards government policies in order to understand what needs to be done in the near future to ride the wave of the new economy. A key factor certainly that helps to determine the digital demand in a country is the expanse of the domestic online community and certainly the digital awareness. And this is where I'll pause to mention the work being done by ICANN and ISOC. So ICANN has been very significant in the digital space. In fact, from the government standpoint, they do have a government advisory council on which Jamaica is represented, and they also certainly invite us to be a part of the at-large advisory council, the LAC, which I believe you'll hear more about further in the program. But they have really been significant in this space, and the work they have done is commendable. ISOC as well, Jamaica has an ISOC chapter. Perhaps this is news to some individuals, and we are encouraging you to become members of this Internet Society, as it is also very, very significant in contributing to the digital landscape. So both entities do play important roles, drawing on their operational experience to share data and provide information and advance to each other. So who are the main agents or main players or stakeholders in this space? Government, certainly, the private sector, civil society, academia, and entities such as ICANN and ISOC, NPOs, nonprofit organizations. So one could speak a little bit about each of these. So the public sector we know has a role to play. And in embracing the digital technologies to build human capital, it is clear that the government has a role to play. So there is evidence to show that population is steadily accelerating in its use of technology, and that firms are increasingly pivoting the online and digital services that they use. Certainly the pandemic that happened recently had forced countries to increase the speed at which technological adoption is taking place, as seen in the growth in online transactions, for instance, in financial services. It is likely that these changes are here to stay. So the government has moved steadily to put a strong ICT foundation in place to allow for the acceleration of technological adoption through robust policy, legislative and regulatory mechanisms, institutional reforms, strategic investments in ICT infrastructure, and building strong partnerships, particularly in the area of cybersecurity. This, of course, will lead to strong support in the adoption of new technologies and safeguard businesses and individuals conducting their activities in cyberspace. So just to mention a few of the initiatives, there's a broadband project going on now to roll out a broadband network. So Stan Julu is here from e-learning. He knows pretty much what's happening there. You would know about the efforts in terms of creating more e-government, tools and applications for use right across government. So the tax administration of Jamaica, for example, now allows you to register a motor vehicle online. We are not unaware of what's taking place in other areas. And so when one talks about AI, for instance, the government also has put in place a task force to look at matters of AI and to ultimately create an AI policy. Well, what of academia? I think about my own experience when I was in college as an undergrad student. Computer science was not even a department in and of itself. It was a sub-department of the mathematics department. Yeah, that's how insignificant it was at the time. Fast forward to today, where you actually have a full faculty of science and technology, and such is the change, in that particular landscape. In fact, one could even go further and talk about some of the contents of some of the courses. So cybercrime and AI and so on were mentioned in a particular course. Now you have academic institutions offering degrees in AI and degrees in cybersecurity. Such is the nature of the game. So I say this to say that, productivity cannot grow beyond the education and skills levels of the population. And so we have to, change. We have to, adopt what is actually, in the space at this point in time. So the development and implementation of comprehensive technology-focused curricula changes across all levels of education is significant. So academia has a very, very key role to play, and they will have to change their curricula accordingly. Again, one has to pay attention to the ethical and practical challenges of integrating, things such as AI and other emerging technologies into the curricula. For Jamaica to meet the growing demands of an ever-changing global society, its citizens must continuously acquire new and relevant skills. So this is a clear and obvious necessity. Preparing stakeholders at all levels, governments, businesses, and academia, psychologically for the change is essential. Failure to do so could disrupt the ecosystems necessary for successful implementation. I continue to speak a little bit about some of the other stakeholders. Civil society, for example, to strive in a digital world, civil society must play an active role in responding to the opportunities and challenges of technology. Doing so means both making use of technology for social good and influencing its future direction, developing new local digital infrastructure, and supporting the work that's been done in a responsible manner. So there's a powerful, underexplored, I would call it, an underutilized role for civil society in the use of collective intelligence and wisdom to shape the future, the digital future. So orienting us in both the public and the planet's interest will never be achieved by just solely looking at market forces. And we do understand and appreciate how important market forces are, as they are the key drivers of what happens in industries and in the competitive environment in the business space. So beyond being a savvy user of technology, civil society has a critical role in making sure that the technology works for and is, of course, for good for everyone. So again, without the populace, without the people, then what else would matter? Who you would be governing as a government? who would you be serving? Who would be your consumers as a private firm? So one has to pay careful attention to these things. We can talk about the private sector. Of course, we understand and appreciate why they're in business. They're there to satisfy, their shareholders' requirements and increase shareholders' wealth. And so it's about profitability, and efficiency gains can, of course, be achieved with the use of the digital technology. So you will think about that also in the context of collaboration, PPPs, private-public partnerships. And in Jamaica, we're no strangers to that. Currently, we do have some happening, right? The broadband network is one such, and I'm sure we perhaps have representatives here from Flow, Digicel, and IslandNet, and they would know more about this. But the private firms, we understand and appreciate, are in the business of making profits, and in so doing, they too must harness the potentials of the technology. So there's the good, there's the bad, and there's the ugly. So the good, of course, we know the benefits of technology are clear. There's no question that we are more connected than ever before, which means that most of our families, friends, coworkers, and loved ones, we can use the technology, in so many different ways. And we need to sometimes stop and appreciate this for a moment. We take it for granted so often, but at the same time, we need to understand and appreciate that this was not always the case. Now, digital technology has positive implications for society as a whole. We know this. And so as private firms, as governments, as civil society, we need to look at the endless possibilities. Well, unfortunately, there's a bad side. So the benefits of technology are genuinely incredible, but they are just some downsides, right? Hyperconnectivity, of course, is one such, which means that we have difficulty disconnecting or creating space to unwind. This can lead to feeling stressed or exhausted and making it harder to truly relax when we need to. And this is on a social front, right? If you could be working, studying, or catching up all the time, how do you know when to stop? And this is another thing that we need to consider. The worst issue, however, is that of the scourge of cybercrime, the security issues. How do we cauterize those, and how do we ensure that while we enjoy and benefit from the good side, we mitigate, minimize, reduce, lessen the bad effects? And that continues to be a critical issue for us. The ugly, of course, unfortunately, there are even more severe risks out there now than before. So the more you venture into the virtual space, the more at risk you are, the more vulnerable you become. And I think there's a representative here from the OIC, the Office of Information Commissioner, and we know what's happening now in terms of the Data Protection Act and the whole issue around anonymity when you go online, feeling safe that your data is private and will not be used in ways or means that you would not have authorized. So we have to think about that, coupled with the ability to share information. We want to do so in record time. We want to quickly create comfortable space that are less dangerous in terms of, the unnecessary downsides. So it's important to give ourselves mindful space to consider these things while we look at the upsides. The reality is, and I'm coming to a close, while the foundation of our digital future has been laid, so much more needs to be done by so many different players. And it's really by pooling resources and pushing forward that we're going to get there. So clearly, all the stakeholders, what I've mentioned before, need to play a role. So we could talk about issues from food delivery services to digital education to digital finance, whatever it is. They all need to be properly aligned and implemented for us to get there. And it all has to happen in parallel. So we have to consider how we can get all of these things done at the same time. So how do we do this? We must collaborate and work together. And it is for reasons like this, why an event such as this is important and critical. So again, I must applaud ICANN, ISOC for, putting this event together. And I do hope that Jamaica is not the final stop in, the roadshow. It is commendable in terms of what we have done in recent times, and we continue to work, and we must work together. We must collaborate in order to ensure that at the end of the day, we are benefiting in the best possible ways. So we can't go it alone. Small island developing states are challenged in so many ways. Size does matter when it comes to these kinds of issues. And so the collaborative, means of working together are very, very significant. So I want to, again, applaud this effort. I want to encourage you to sit back, enjoy the entire day, stick around for as long as you can. It is a very, 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 very important event that is filled with a wealth of knowledge and information which you can live with. So I thank you, and I will continue to be around for the rest of the program as well. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Gary, for that keynote message on Jamaica's digital future, and to highlight the fact that each of us has a role to play in Jamaica's digital future. While our next speaker needs no introduction, as he is known across the Caribbean, it is an honor for me to introduce Mr. Albert Daniels. Mr. Albert Daniels is ICANN Senior Manager and Stakeholder Engagement for Stakeholder Engagement in the Caribbean. He joined ICANN in 2013 and resides in St. Lucia. Is a member of ICANN's Global Stakeholder Engagement Team for Latin America and the Caribbean. As the ICANN Senior Manager for Stakeholder Engagement for the Caribbean, Albert leads engagement in 32 Caribbean territories and also leads specialized projects in the ICANN Latin American and Caribbean regional strategy. Albert's responsibilities include developing and executing the organization's strategic and tactical objectives in the Caribbean region. Prior to working at ICANN, Albert served as the Information Systems and Information Security Auditor, ICT consultant at Creative Technology Solutions Limited. He also held the position of Regional IT Manager at KPMG Eastern Caribbean and Account Supervisor IT Trainer, Group IT Director, a man with many hats, at the CHL Group in St. Lucia. Albert served on several national boards in St. Lucia and has broad internet and technology-related experience, having personally introduced the internet to St. Lucia in 1993, a pioneer. He has attended many ICANN meetings and has been involved in the ICANN Fellowship Program as one of the first fellows in 2007, many firsts, and also as a fellowship mentor. Albert holds a Bachelor's of Business Administration in Information Technology and also specialized in project management at the University of Cambridge. He also holds several professional and industry certifications. Albert is fluent in English and conversant in Spanish, French, Norwegian, and French Creole. Please welcome Mr. Albert Daniels, who will introduce us to ICANN, the NextGen program, fellowship program, universal acceptance.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Otis, for that frightening introduction. Every time I hear this introduction, I keep saying to myself, I need to go online and cut it at least in half or down to a quarter. Yeah, sure. I'm just trying to make sure that I can see the slides that are up on the screen. So I really want to thank a few people before I get started. Of course, thank you, Mr. Osbourne, for that very humbling introduction. But like Rodrigo, I also want to call out and identify and thank Chanel McPherson and Natalie Rose, who we've been working with for some time at ICANN and who have really put in a lot of effort in getting this important event together so that, as Rodrigo indicated, we can bring ICANN to you so you better understand why we are trying to get you involved in the activities that are taking place at the Internet Corporation for assigned names and numbers. Of course, I also want to thank Gary Campbell. He was a bit humble. He has far more experience with ICANN as he let on. He actually historically has been a very active player within what we refer to as the multi-stakeholder community within ICANN, and that is very important. And in terms of his content, I want to thank him for identifying each one of those stakeholder groups, because this is what ICANN is all about, the multi-stakeholder community. Each one of you sitting in today and sitting here today and also online actually what we refer to as stakeholders, and you are the most important persons in what I will be describing as the ICANN ecosystem. So my role here this morning is to try in a very short space of time to explain what this whole ICANN thing is all about and convince you that you should be paying attention to what is happening in ICANN and getting involved in the activities that are taking place in ICANN, and possibly even going to one or two of these ICANN meetings that we have all over the world. So next slide, please. Thank you. So we all use the internet, and we don't think much about what happens in terms of making sure that the internet is working. We go onto our devices, we wake up in the morning, we take our cell phones, and we just expect that the internet will be working and that WhatsApp will be working. We check all our messages, check all our emails, but we don't give a second thought to what is behind making sure that each one of those mobile phones work. Is there anybody in here right now who does not have a mobile phone? Put up your hands, please. Let me call you out. No hands are going up. Everyone in here has some kind of internet device, whether it be an iPad, a tablet, a mobile phone, a laptop. And for all of those devices to connect to the internet, they need something referred to as an IP address, an Internet Protocol address. And this is what allows and enables the internet to work universally. And ICANN, as an organization, the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, coordinates and manages all of those numbers globally. If ICANN shut down today, guess what would happen? Internet would not work, exactly. Because those numbers, when I wanted to send a WhatsApp message to Chanel, the message would end up going to Nicholas. When I wanted to send an email to one of my business counterparts, it would end up going to the competition. So these numbers allow the internet to function in the way that we expect it to. And the thing about numbers is that there's so many of them, and these days they're getting so much more complicated that they are difficult to remember. If I had to remember the IP address for Chanel's phone every time I wanted to send her a message, it wouldn't work. But I can remember domain names. If I want to do my online banking, I can go to bankofjamaica.jm or bankofjamaica.com. So there are also unique names that allow the internet to work. And ICANN as an organization coordinates those at a global level as well. And to translate the names into the numbers, there's another system called the domain name system, the DNS, and ICANN does a lot of work in ensuring that that is stable, and every time the translation is done, you get sent to the right website for your bank, or the right person gets the email address. Next slide, please. So what ICANN does as an organization is we coordinate with all of our partners globally to ensure that the internet keeps working. So that is one of the roles that ICANN as an organization has. We play our part in ensuring that the internet keeps rolling every day. When you get up, when you go to bed, your emails go to the right places. When you want to put stuff on the web, it gets to the right website. Next slide, please. So there are several partners that we work with globally to ensure that this works. So ICANN coordinates all of the numbers, but we distribute those globally through organizations called regional internet registries. There's a registry for Latin America and the Caribbean. There's a registry for North America, Canada, and most of the English-speaking Caribbean. So when we want to get IP addresses pushed out to the Caribbean, they go out through these regional internet registries. And there are other registries for other parts of the world as well. Next slide, please. Okay, all of a sudden I can't see the slide. Okay, good. Next slide, please. Good. So these are some of the registries that are actually listed here that push out those numbers. ARIN for North American parts of the Caribbean, LAC-i for Latin America and other parts of the Caribbean. And there we see the regional internet registries that serve Africa, Europe, and the Asia Pacific. Next slide, please. So this slide perhaps is one of the most important slides that I want to explain to you. This slide actually captures what ICANN is all about. And ICANN is more than simply the ICANN organization that Nicholas, Rodrigo, and myself work for, but ICANN is an ecosystem. And there are three core elements to that ecosystem. The most important part of that ecosystem is what Rodrigo touched on, that multi-stakeholder community, where each of you and your colleagues in Jamaica, across the Caribbean, and globally fit in, where persons from government, from the business sector, from the academic community, from the end user community, from the technical community, you are the most important persons in ICANN. Believe it or not, I saw when I came in, lots of persons wearing the ICANN shirts, and we have our ICANN business cards, but we are not the important ones. You are the important ones because you are the ones in the global multi-stakeholder community who determine what kind of internet we have globally. You decide on the way the internet is structured, what kinds of domain names we have, how much security is deployed and implemented. And ICANN as an organization facilitates those discussions. I was saying to one of the participants this morning that a good example of that is with domain names. What are some domain names, top-level domain names that anybody knows? Give me some examples, anybody? .com? .edu? I can't hear you. .bar? Okay, that's an interesting one, .bar. But the common ones that we are associated with originally were .com, .net, .edu, and so on. Those are what we refer to as the legacy domain names. But see what happened. You, as a community, came together and decided, those are boring. We want more competition. We want more choice. And what ICANN as an organization did was we facilitated your discussions. You came together, and the end result was that there are over 1,200 new top-level domain names that have been added into the root. like .bar that the gentleman in front here just mentioned. He clearly knows a lot about the internet, but there are other interesting ones like .education, .sports, .hotels, .perfume, .nyc. And these changes and enhancements to the internet came about not because of ICANN as an organization, but rather because of ICANN facilitating the community in discussions to decide on the type of internet that really the community wanted. So you have this multi-stakeholder community, you have the ICANN organization, and then you have the highest sort of decision-making body in the ICANN ecosystem, which is the ICANN board. So the multi-stakeholder community would draft policy, send those all the way up to the ICANN board of directors, which would then put those policies out for public comment. So even if you have not been participating in the development of a policy at the various stages, you would still have an opportunity to give your comment whether you agree or disagree with what is being proposed, so that in the end, the final policy, having gone to the board, would be able to be decided upon in the interest of the community. So this is what the ICANN board does in playing its role in the ICANN system. It takes final decisions. That final decision whether or not to have new top-level domain names actually was taken by the ICANN board of directors. Next slide, please. So within that ICANN multi-stakeholder community, there are various sections, and we won't go into all of the details, but there is a space for everyone. Jeremy White is here, and his colleague from the .jm country code top-level domain name, which represents Jamaica. And there is a space in the ICANN multi-stakeholder system for persons like Jeremy and his team who manage country code top-level domain names. .jm for Jamaica, .tt for Trinidad, BB for Barbados, and so on. So one of the benefits of participating in the ICANN multi-stakeholder system is that you will have country code managers like Jeremy who are at different stages. Some are more advanced than others. And what happens in a face-to-face ICANN meeting is these country code managers can get together and share notes. Jeremy can ask colleagues from other countries, what problems are you having? How have you solved them? And that can redound to the benefit of Jamaica, because Jeremy can use what he has learned at an ICANN meeting from other CCTLD managers to enhance the CCTLD in Jamaica. That is one of the important aspects of attending an ICANN meeting. So that is all done in a grouping called the CCNSO within ICANN, the Country Code Name Supporting Organization. And similarly, there's a group in ICANN that deals with the top-level domain names that we just spoke about, .com, .org, .edu, .bar, .education, and so on. A lot of policy is set within the ICANN ecosystem with regard to those. And of course, the name ICANN has two ends in it. One of those ends is for names, and the other one is for numbers. So the Address Supporting Organization, the ASO, is that sort of space within the ICANN ecosystem where the management of policies with regard to numbers is dealt with. Next slide, please. So these are the three main entities within the ICANN ecosystem that generate activity with regard to policy development. And while that policy development is taking place, while you are making your inputs into what kind of internet we have representatives of different communities advising the board on policy. So you have a group that represents the interests of persons, many persons like yourselves, the end users, which are referred to as the at-large. So the at-large within ICANN, and you'll hear a little bit more from Carlton and others about the at-large. The at-large is the voice of the end users within the ICANN ecosystem. We also have a grouping that Gary Campbell referred to, the GAC, the Governmental Advisory Committee. That is the voice of governments within the ICANN ecosystem, because everything that's done in the ecosystem can be impacted by national laws and national regulations. And this is why we are very enthused with having the input of government representatives in the policy development that's taking place within ICANN. And of course, security is a very important aspect of what's going on the internet. So we have a group that just focuses on security only. And in ICANN, there are lots of acronyms. So that last one that you see up there, ESAC, the Security, Stability, and Advisory Committee. And there's another technical group within ICANN referred to as the Root Server System Advisory Committee. So while policies are being developed, next slide, please. These groups, which are referred to as advisory committees, are part of the process in giving advice to the ICANN board at different stages. So those three entities that I spoke of first, which have participants from across the globe, including Jamaica, the entity dealing with numbers, the entity dealing with country code names, the entity dealing with generic names, they initiate policy development, and you have this chain of events which leads to final policy implementation. And Rodrigo will be talking a little bit more about that later on. But as that series of steps is taking place, the advisory committees give advice to the ICANN board on what is going on. Next slide, please. So ICANN works in public meetings, and these public meetings are rotated over the 5 geographic regions. And the last ICANN public meeting that took place was ICANN 81. We've had 81 meetings of ICANN of the ICANN ecosystem, and that meeting took place in Istanbul, Turkey. Next slide, please. And the thing about these meetings is, at these meetings, I normally say to persons, if you are going to be going to an ICANN meeting, and there's some people in the room who have been to ICANN meetings, it's like getting ready for carnival. You have to take your vitamins, you have to go to the gym, you have to make sure that you are fit, because at an ICANN meeting, there are several sessions taking place at the same time. You have the business community in one room having a session, you have the technical community in one room having a session, you have representatives of government having their discussions, you have representatives of end users, and you could very well find yourself at an ICANN meeting running from session to session, or sitting in one session like you're doing right now while following another session on your laptop at the same time. And the whole idea is that all of these different parts of ICANN are important to policy development. Next slide, please. So what this slide sort of illustrates is the sequence of ICANN meetings. And those of you who are interested in physically attending an ICANN meeting should pay attention to this slide, because our last ICANN meeting, ICANN 81, took place in Istanbul, Turkey. And typically what happens online before every ICANN meeting is we have something that we refer to as prep week, because you might find that ICANN is very complicated. We have all of these acronyms and so on. So prep week is designed to break it down and give you a soft landing into the actual physical face-to-face ICANN meeting or into virtual participation, because you can participate in every ICANN meeting virtually. We have a meeting coming up in March, as you see on this slide, from the 2nd to the 7th of March in Seattle, Washington. But if you are not able to attend that meeting physically, you can actually all participate virtually, as some of you are doing today. And then the next meeting after that is a policy forum, ICANN 83, that takes place in Prague from the 9th to the 12th of June. And then in 2025, we're having a community forum, ICANN 84, from the 25th to the 30th of October. Now, you may say, well, I can't afford to fly to Prague. I can't afford to fly to Seattle, Washington. Istanbul is just too far from me. I don't speak the language. But ICANN has several programs that try to assist persons to physically get to an ICANN meeting. Rodrigo mentioned the fellowship program, which is one of our flagship programs for getting you to an ICANN meeting. Every person in this room can apply to be an ICANN fellow. And you see the dates on there. Make note of those dates for ICANN 84. The fellowship program has an application phase, an analysis phase, and then a selection phase. So you see that the fellowship program is closed for ICANN 82 and 83, but for ICANN 84, it will open on the 25th of February, 2025. And it closes on the dot on the 25th of March, 2025. So if you are interested in attending ICANN 85, speak to Carlton, speak to Chanel, speak to Natalie Rose, or send me an email, and we will guide you through making your application for the fellowship program. Anybody can apply, regardless of your background or your activities or your age, and it is done on a competitive basis. So next slide, please. If you're interested in physically getting to an ICANN meeting, learn a little bit more about the fellowship program. If not, you can always participate in ICANN meetings virtually. During prep week, these are some of the things that happen. It's a preparatory meeting. We get you ready, and it's not only useful for persons who are experienced in ICANN, like Carlton, for example, who knows ICANN back to front and from top to bottom, but they're also very important for newcomers to ICANN, because we give you a sense of what is going to be discussed at the ICANN meeting, what the hot topics are, and how you can prepare to attend an ICANN meeting. Next slide, please. These are some of the hot topics that you will hear more about in terms of what we are actually discussing at an ICANN meeting. During the steps that we went through for bringing all of these new top-level domain names into the internet, there was some contention and there were some auctions. And the bottom line is that a significant sum of money, over 200,000 US dollars, was in a pool somewhere as a result of these auctions. So ICANN was being a steward of these funds, but it had to decide what to do with these money. So what did we do? You, the community, got together and you discussed, what can this money be used for? And in the end, you decided with ICANN's facilitation that there should be a grant program where some of these funds can actually go towards different IT projects that happen in your countries, in your regions, and so on. So there were several steps, and the first round of the grant program has been completed, but who do you think decided how that grant program should be shaped? It wasn't Rodrigo and Nicholas and myself, but it was you. It was your participation in that ICANN community that determined the nature of this grant program. So see what will happen. If you don't go to an ICANN meeting, if you don't participate in an ICANN meeting, then someone else will be making these decisions that can affect you. So who can participate? Can Jamaica participate? Well, nobody from Jamaica was there when the discussions were going out. So what do you think will happen? And this is why it's important for you to be there, for you to be in the room while important decisions are being made in many different aspects of what happens with the internet. Another very important thing that's going on, you'll hear more about this from Rodrigo, is the next round of new generic top-level domain names. We went from .com, .org, and so on to some new ones. There's another round coming up. What we found in that last round in 2012 is that there was not much participation, particularly from underserved regions like the Caribbean. So what we are trying to do in this next round coming is create a situation where we give assistance through something called an applicant support program, financially and technically, so that we can get more participation from our region in that area. There's a topic of universal acceptance, which I'll touch on soon, in a little while, and then we all know about the problems with DNS abuse, and there's a very important topic being discussed, RDRS, which relates to cybersecurity and giving law enforcement who are authorized access to the information that they can actually use to prosecute crimes and prosecute criminals and so on. Next slide, please. So these are just, this is just a very small sampling of some of the topics that are being discussed at ICANN. I mentioned the grant program, and this slide actually captures some of the aspects of the grant program. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. This slide captures some of the aspects of the new generic top-level domain names program, and you see some of the examples of the different top-level domain names that are actually on there. Next slide, please. Rodrigo is going to be talking about how, if you have an organization or an entity that is interested in getting a new top-level domain name, you can get support from ICANN to help you apply to get that top-level domain name and manage it. Next slide, please. And then RDRS, very important. We all are familiar with cyber attacks and cyber crimes and so on. And typically law enforcement, your local law enforcement, regional law enforcement, international law enforcement like Interpol and so on, they want to try to identify who is the hacker. I'm seeing some faces in the back, I won't point them out, but they look like they could be hackers with their hoodies and on their laptops and so on. So law enforcement needs to know who is running, this site that is giving fake information. But the problem is with something called GDPR, which you may have heard of, General Data Protection Regulations, some of this data has been redacted. It's not easy for law enforcement to get at this data. So one of the systems that has been developed within ICANN is referred to as the RDRS, the Registration Data Request System. And this is a very important system, particularly for law enforcement, to connect with the persons, with the organizations that have that information on that guy in the back with the hoodie, who has a website which is running, and there's some in suits as well. Don't think it's only the guys in hoodies who are the bad actors. You have some who are very well dressed, like Jeremy. Well, we know Jeremy is a good guy, all right? He has on a tie and so on. But the important thing is that law enforcement needs to get this data, and because of GDPR, sometimes it's difficult for them to get at it, including your local law enforcement and your regional law enforcement across the region. So it's important to be at ICANN meetings, to participate, to understand what's going on, so that you then will be able to apply these tools that are available in your local situation. Next slide, please. So very importantly, I wanted to touch for a few more, a minute or two, on these programs that are for newcomers within ICANN. These are programs that help you get into ICANN, settle in and participate and learn what's going on. The fellowship program was launched in 2007 at ICANN 29, and believe it or not, our Vice President Rodrigo de la Parra and myself were two of the original fellows. We were in Puerto Rico in ICANN 29 when that ICANN program was started. And Puerto Rico was a very important meeting because there was a special meeting of all of the country code top-level domain name managers from the Caribbean. We got together once, but you know what happened at that meeting? Everybody exchanged the business cards like we normally did, and we said, happy to meet you, we promised to stay in touch, and 2 weeks later, nobody spoke to each other anymore. So this is why we have to continuously drive. We have to continuously pay attention to what's going on, continuously develop those relationships so that we can get new persons involved. Chanel is a fantastic asset because she's very interested in something called DNSSEC. It is a security extension that you will be hearing about from Nicolas. So in the fellowship program, you are actually able to participate in a fully structured development program getting you ready regardless of where you come from. As a fellow, you are already a leader in your community. So you come to ICANN with knowledge about your sector. And all you need to do now is learn about ICANN. So you then go back into your community as an individual who is knowledgeable about your sector, whether it's the ISP, the flow, the Digicel, and so on. And then you can take back all of the important aspects of the fellowship program. We also have another program which relates to having the ICANN meeting in a particular region, particularly for university students, called the NextGen program. And next slide, please. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So with both of those programs, the fellowship program and the NextGen program, what happens is ICANN organization will finance your airfare to get to the destination where the meeting is taking place. So we just had a meeting in Istanbul. Before that, we were in Kigali. We've been to Hamburg. Sometimes we are closer to the Caribbean. We were in Puerto Rico. Next, we're going to Seattle. So the fellowship program covers the cost of your airfare as well as the cost of your accommodation and gives you a small stipend to take care of some of the expenses to attend and participate, because we want you to participate in the ICANN meeting. If you can't participate physically, we want to try to get you to the ICANN meeting. And this is what the fellowship program and the NextGen program are all about. And both of them are structured to give you a soft landing into ICANN. We have a newcomer program which doesn't have any financial support, but it's just a program of going through different online sessions, prep week, and getting you ready to attend an ICANN meeting. Next slide, please. So fellows come from all over the world, from many different backgrounds. And good. Here we see some photos, and we see some more details of the fellowship program. Next slide, please. So this is the process. We are now in the first stage of the fellowship program where I'm talking to you about it. I'm doing some outreach and promotion. The next stage of the fellowship program is in your hands. You have to go to the ICANN website, icann.org, and apply for a fellowship. And then after your application is reviewed internally within the ICANN multi-stakeholder community and by the ICANN staff, there's the selection process. And after you have been notified that you have been selected as a fellow to attend an ICANN meeting, then you meet someone who is called Siranush Vardanyan from Armenia. She's the one who runs the ICANN program. And those of you who've been on the ICANN program know she ends up being like a mother because she guides you through your preparation, getting ready to actually attend an ICANN meeting. And while you are at the ICANN meeting, you have certain responsibilities to attend sessions, to participate, to write certain reports, to stand up in the community and ask questions, and make your input. So all of this is very well structured in the ICANN programs of fellowship and NextGen. And then when the meeting is finished, you write a little report saying, how you benefited and what you got out of the meeting. So the fellowship program is really accessible to everyone, and it is a way that you can get involved in the ICANN community and make your input into the type of internet that we have. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. And then finally, very quickly, I just wanted to talk about universal acceptance for a very short while. Next slide. So universal acceptance is one of the problems that we are trying to solve in the ICANN community. Looking at this slide, you will see that if you thought that English was the most spoken language in the world, you would realize that that is not the case. The most spoken language in the world is Mandarin, mainly spoken by persons from Asia. And then after Mandarin, the next most spoken language is Spanish, and you see as you go down the list. But the challenge is the internet that we have is mainly based on English. We want to sell products all over the world, but we're trying to speak to people who speak Russian or Chinese or Hindi and so on, and we're trying to speak to them in English. Next slide, please. So one of the things that has happened with the internet is that domain name system. Next slide, please. The domain name system that translates the numbers to the names has actually evolved over time. Next slide, please. So the domain name system has evolved. We now have additional top-level domain names that have more than 3 characters. It's not just com, org, edu, and net. We now have domain names that are much longer. We have domain names that are in special characters from other scripts. And the internet tries to be a digitally inclusive place. And because some of these new domain names are not recognized by our systems, then you have situations where you try to put in an email address or you try to put in a website and the system gives you back an error saying invalid domain name or invalid email address. It's not that the email address is invalid, it's that the system that has been developed does not accept a properly working email address, which is longer than what we are accustomed to, or a website address in Chinese characters or in Indian characters, and so on. Next slide, please. So one of the problems that we try to solve, next slide, please, is to get local programmers and persons who are developing systems to realize that we have all of these new email addresses, we have all of these new website addresses, and we want digital inclusion. We want as many persons as possible from all languages all over the world to actually use the internet. So next slide, please. All of these new email addresses and websites really should be accepted by all systems. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So we have all of these new email addresses, and you have some examples here: Armenian, Chinese, Arabic, Tamil, Greek. All of these are valid working email addresses on the internet. Believe it or not, persons who speak these languages can set up a hotel reservation to come on vacation here in Jamaica. And in some cases, if they put in their email address into the system of the hotel, they will get an error message back saying invalid email address. But it's not that the email address is invalid, it's just that the system that has been developed by a local or regional programmer is not accepting these working email addresses. And it's also true for certain websites. So one of the problems we're trying to solve within the ICANN community is how can we get programmers, how can we get developers to realize that they should program their system to be able to accept and process these email addresses. Next slide, please. So their system should be able to accept, validate, process, store, and display all of these email addresses as well as website addresses that have been developed that you, the community, wanted to get onto the internet. So I just wanted to touch, I think this is my last slide. Next slide, please. I just wanted to touch on those different topics that are currently being discussed within the ICANN community to give you a sense of why it is important for you to be there. First of all, to understand aspects of the internet that are important to you here in Jamaica and across the region, and for you to make your input into determining what type of internet that you actually have to use, both for business and also for entertainment and socially as well. So I thank you I saw some heads nodding and I saw some smiles. My friend in the hoodie at the back there tried to sneak out, but he's still sitting. So hopefully he'll learn a little bit more about how to be on the other side of the fence and change from being a black hat into being a white hat. But it's very important that you all understand what this ICANN thing is so that you see where you fit in and understand how you can participate. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Albert. So there are many aspects of ICANN that you can get involved with, including working with, although not necessarily ICANN, but joining the Internet Engineering Task Force as a programmer so that these universal acceptance can be implemented. Now, we had on our program next Rodrigo de la Parra, but he's such a very, very important ICANN person that he appeared twice on the program. So he has humbly recommended that he kills two birds with one stone. So he will appear later before we break for lunch. Without further ado, I will now introduce our next speaker, Mr. Carlton Samuels. Mr. Carlton Samuels is an international consultant with an extensive body of work in areas of strategy, policy, process innovation, and governance, with focus on ICT for development, shortened for as ICT4D, technology in education and privacy. He currently works on projects in digital transformation and data protection. He's actively involved in internet governance via the Internet Governance Forum, IGF, as well as ICANN's names and numbers policy development process associated with the Internet's domain name system. He has led several senior executive positions in private sector and academic environments. He serves and has served on several boards and committees related to manufacturing, education, library, and information. He serves on boards of 3 private sector companies where he chairs the compensation and strategy committees. He has certifications in aspects of networking, data protection, telecommunications, and university teaching. Earned an undergraduate degree with honors from the University of the West Indies and advanced degrees and diplomas from Purdue, George Mason University, and the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Carlton Samuels.
Good morning, everybody. I thank you all for coming. I'm glad to see so many of you here. When I see a lot of us together, it makes it feel that we're getting somewhere. For those of us who've been in the business of trying to get together with people, having interest in internet and internet matters, it is a real opportunity for us to reinforce the message. So I'm going to talk to you about the Internet Society and to give you an idea of why it is important to us. And I have to start with telling you what Internet Society, that is the Global Internet Society, what it says, its mission and role. It says Internet Society is dedicated to advocating policies that ensure the Internet is and remains the global public resource connecting each of us to all of us, that it remains open and accessible to all, that it grows and continues to grow and is secure. So the mission is to empower individuals, organizations, and governments to drive the future of the internet. I noticed that when Natalie spoke about that, she was very adamant that that is the business of ISOC, to drive the future of the internet. And we want to drive the future of internet in a certain way. We want to make it inclusive. We want it to be a focus of innovation, and there has to be some respect for human rights. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the road to ISOC Jamaica. It may sound as if it was happenstance, everything was happenstance, and nothing is happenstance. It was all orchestrated. And I have to start to tell you about why the internet became important to us. It was part of a business strategy that we got involved. I was at the University of the West Indies, and the University of the West Indies had to change its business strategy. It had to reach more students. It had to innovate around how you reach more students, and we had to embrace this idea of e-learning. We had a remote teaching, what we call distance education, and that was going on. We were using voice bridges to connect university centers around the Caribbean. And we had it in a room. You had 20 or 30 people in a room, and that was the university center. And we used the voice technology to teach. So it was distance education. If we were going to grow, we had to grow outside those rooms. And we had to decide on a way forward so that we could reach more students where they are. And that is one of the major things. We didn't want you to come to us. We wanted to come to you. And so the internet became very important to realizing and implementing that strategy. So it was an aspiration of the University of the West Indies, where I had a senior role. And I can tell you there are some members of the team here sitting with me. I am forever grateful to them for helping us to realize the goal we had to do penetration. We had to penetrate further into the Caribbean region. We had to reach students where they were. We had to innovate, and we were also eyeing global expansion. The university had to grow, so we had to look at growing outside of the Caribbean basin, and we felt we had a brand that was global, and we had to have a way of projecting the global brand of the University of the West Indies. The thing you see now where they're saying the University of the West Indies is way up in the list of universities worldwide, that was not happenstance. We worked at it. We had to do it. So we had a single global internet, and we needed social innovation, and we had to drive digital transformation. That was the strategy. And we have to bridge and translate the vision. So we had to connect the vision to the action. We have to think local, act global, think long term. That's what we had to do. And so we set out to change the way we provided services. We decided we'd take out the audio bridges and we'll have direct internet access. And the only good thing is, at the time, the University of the West Indies had probably the single largest concentration of technical skills that was conversant with internet technology around the region. If you put them all together, it was the single largest group. Some of them are right here with you. So we had to flex, and that's what we did. The university had something called UIDEC, Distance Education Center, and they were across 15 Caribbean territories, from Belize in the west to Barbados in the east and Trinidad and Tobago in the south, and all points in between. And in order to move the distance education onto an internet platform, we had to build relationships around the Caribbean. We just had to. We still had two providers, main providers of telecommunication services on which our platform was built. And so we had to deal with them. We had to ensure that others in the region understood where we were going and seek their support. So for example, we were dealing with the regulators around the Caribbean long before anyone was trying to bring them together around an issue. The first requirement was that we understood that we needed to know who was governing the internet. We had to know, because we were running a business and we don't like uncertainty. We have to know who was, we had to know what were the rules. We had to make sure we encourage everybody to follow the same rules, because we were intending to have a single global internet that was open to everybody, because our business depended on that situation. So we started around this idea that we had to participate in the governance of the internet. And at that time, the governance mechanisms were just emerging. So for example, you had the UN resolution that gave rise to what is called WSIS, the World Summit on Information Society. That was in 2001. And by 2003, we had the WSIS conference in Morocco, and we had people from the Caribbean that were involved in that. And you will hear people like Jacqueline Morris from Trinidad was a member of that group. You had a diplomat from Barbados was involved in that group. And we started a group called the Caribbean Internet Forum. It was started by regulators. The two regulators that came to us. At that time, if you were at the UWI, everybody called you about everything. So you get noticed a lot. So I just happened to be in the right place at the time. there was a deputy director of the Office of Utilities Regulation. His name is Courtney Jackson, may he rest in peace. And another fella, both deputy directors, Delray and Newman. And they called in to say that we had to start something to get involved in the governance process. And so we decided we'd register a company. Caribbean Internet Forum was registered as a company. And our first job was to participate in the WSIS consultations that took place in Antigua. And we went around and started bringing others in to the conversation. We had people like Donna de Freitas from St. Vincent and the Grenadines. We had James Corbin, who was the vice president for Cable and Wireless Barbados, and several others that were involved in this conversation. But what is important for you to recognize that from the outset, we recognized that we had to be pan-Caribbean, and we recognized that we had to have different people from different backgrounds involved in the process. It was always multi-stakeholder for us, and it was a way for us to build influence. Because the more persons we knew, the better it was for us to ensure that the policy perspectives that we were supporting was actually in place around the region. So we were building on what others have done before. It's not new. For example, at the University of the West Indies, we had Bob Lancashire. Robert Lancashire was using the internet to teach chemistry. He was professor of computational chemistry, and he had a website that he was using to share information that what he was teaching. And in engaging with Bob, we found out a couple of things. We found out that there were people all over the world who was using his content. They were logging on to our website at the UWI, maintained by Bob, and getting content. So his content that he was initially using to teach just his students were teaching other students all over the world. And when he started seeing these developments, we started talking about how it is that we were going to modularize and how it is that we were going to make this a part. So we decided that as in any academic institution, we would develop a framework of what we would do. And that was our e-learning framework. So we had things like internet-supported courses. We defined what those were. Internet-based courses, we defined what those were. And internet-optimized courses, we defined what those were. In fact, we created the framework on which the University of the West Indies began online teaching and learning. And that was built on what others like Bob was already doing. It was nothing new. We were simply extending the model and defining it and formalizing it so that we could have something going. So the governance mechanisms were very important to us, and we started involving ourselves in the governance mechanisms. So we began involved in the ICANN world. Our job was to see that we were participating in the things that mattered for the internet. Albert spoke to you about names and numbers policy, which is the ICANN remit. And we had already begun working with ICANN because the .jm registry was at the UWI. And here again are the group that was involved in managing the registry. We have Andy there, we have Jeremy, we have Omar. Those were the guys who were managing the registry for the .jm country code specific top level domain. So we were embedded in what was happening at ICANN. Then we got invited by the government to be senior advisor to the Government Advisory Committee. By then, Jamaica became a member. The person representing Jamaica at the time was a lady named, what's her name? I can't remember right now. But she was involved in it. And she said, Camilla Rohn was her name. Camilla Rohn was the Director General in the Ministry of Science and Technology. And she was the first GAC connection to ICANN. and she invited me to be the senior advisor to the GAC on that aspect of it. So we had the CCTLD covered, we had GAC covered, and then we started by participating in another area of ICANN, which Albert spoke about, which was the At-Large Advisory Committee. The reason we got involved in that At-Large Advisory Committee, as Albert told you, it had a lot to do with who was available and who understood. But that was a team effort. When I might have been the face of the At-Large Advisory Committee, but these guys, that team, I had the support from that team because you had to be away for weeks looking at ICANN stuff. And I didn't have to worry. I still had a job. I was CI University director, but I had a team back in the shop that was taking care of business. So everything that we have done to this day depended on that team. And that team, thankfully, is here today and probably has the greatest sense of knowledge about how the internet works and the kinds of things we have to do, not just in the governance arrangements, but also in the technical arrangements to make it work. So there was always a need to have people bought in as part of the governance mechanism. And this is where ISOC came into play. We understood that there was more to internet governance as it was, let me give you an explanation, a definition of internet governance that was given by the WIGIG, with the Working Group for Internet Governance. It says, internet governance is the development and application by governments, the private sector, and civil society in their respective roles of shared principles, norms, rules, decision-making procedures, and programs that shape and use the internet. Notice there, they define it as an inclusiveness, that everybody was included. Government, private sector, civil society, multiple stakeholders. And so we had to get involved in these governance mechanisms. We started thinking of an internet society just about 2005, 2006. And the first out of the box, we said we would have an ISOC Caribbean chapter, covered the Caribbean. And there's a small group of us get together that thought, here's how we would do it. We would have a single ISOC Caribbean chapter. It was going to be in all territories. We ran into some roadblocks. First of all, we had a problem deciding what the legal representation would be. So we look at how we would have it legalized as an entity in Belize, in St. Lucia, in Barbados, in Jamaica. It wouldn't work. The Internet Society, the Global Internet Society says, you have to have a defined local group around which you build an Internet Society chapter. So the Caribbean-wide chapter was not going to work. So then we segued to having local chapters in every jurisdiction. And every jurisdiction, the first one that came out the box was ISOC TT, ISOC Trinidad and Tobago. Remember now, we are looking at internet because we know that there were other things that were involved in the governance. We had critical internet resources, administration of a root server system, technical internet standards, and somebody mentioned the IETF there, the security and safety, development aspects, issues pertaining the use of the internet, administration of the domain name system, internet protocol addresses, intellectual property rights. You have peering and interconnection, telecommunications infrastructure, convergent technologies, data protection and privacy. I gather that the Office of the Information Commission is here. All these things were part of what we had to look for in the internet governance space. E-commerce, of course, and consumer rights. You hear a lot of talk these days about digital sovereignty, how you define the digital space for development, economic and social development, where you have sovereignty of it. And all of these issues kept on coming and coming. So we had to widen the base for advocacy. And that was where the Internet Societies came in. Our movement through ISOC Jamaica actually started in about 2014, a long time ago. And we started by having discussions about how we were going to create a local Jamaican chapter. The plan always was, because the University of the West Indies was always involved already, we wanted to change the focus. And so we chose to build around University of the Commonwealth Caribbean. It was not just happenstance. The first person that we thought we would get to initiate, do the things that Chanel is doing, was a young lady here by the name of KINDNS Davis. We had got her recruited as an ICANN fellow, and so we thought once we started the Internet Society, she would be the focus person to get it done. She didn't last long because she had other development ideas. She migrated, went to Holland and got involved there somewhere and became an academic there. So then we looked for persons to start focus on this project. And we had Andrew Gorton. Andrew Gorton was an expatriate. He was Irish. He was working for Digicel. And so he was given the task. And then Andrew Gorton left, and we segued to Natalie Rose. And Natalie Rose, back and forth, we had that at one point. We even brought in a UWI person to help Natalie Rose. We had Patrick, who was supposed to help Natalie Rose. And then finally, we had a community developed around it. People like Gary Campbell, Shoshana Richards, Andrea Livingston Prince, Malaka Williams, Jermaine McDonald, Rowan Williams, and Michelle Marius, Brianna Chang, Ian Sutherland, Neil Williams, all these people. We started coming together to see what we had. What we started with was the bylaws that came from Trinidad and Tobago, ISOC-TT. And our job was to adapt it and start a chapter. The chapter, to install a chapter, you needed 25 members to start with. There were already global members, Internet Society global members in Jamaica. So Shernan Osepa, who was then the ISOC manager in the region, we got a list of global members from Shernan, and so we started calling them up to see them segue to the chapter. At the end of the time, we had 25 members, 27 members, and we made the application. The application was made in 2018, 4 years after we began the effort. And the Internet Society came to being in 2020, right? With 25 members, most ISOC global members. We now have 107 ISOC Jamaica members. And here's the thing. The ISOC Jamaica general purpose. And I want you to look at the website for ISOC, ISOCJM, www.isocjm.org. And if you follow it, you will find out what the general purpose of ISOC Jamaica is. It shall to harness the global internet to connect Jamaica to the world and to advocate for equal access to the internet. And they have some general guiding principles. Go there and you see all of them. Open, unencumbered, beneficial use of the internet. Self-regulated content providers, no prior censorship of online communication. Online free expression not restricted. Open forum for development of standards and internet technology. Non-discriminatory use. Personal information generated is either misused or not by other informed consent of the principal. Encryption of communications on the internet. Encouragement of cooperation between networks. If you look at those principles, those are the principles we started with in the first place. ISOC Jamaica came into being to advance the advocacy for the free, open, global internet that is safe and secure. I encourage you, if you're not a member yet, that you should join ISOC Jamaica. And I think he has the ISOC Jamaica line up there where you can get on to see it. It's important for you to join. Why is it important for you to join? Let me emphasize again. We believe that the internet is our last effort to give equal opportunity for social and economic development. Those of us who've been there since the 2000s believe this is the case. This new crop of ISOC Jamaica, such as Chanel, they actually believe that too. And we want more of you to believe that, and we want more of you to understand there are a lot of other issues pertaining internet development and internet access where your voice is important in the governance of the internet. You have opportunities to join ISOC Jamaica. You will have opportunities to become involved in the names and numbers policy development through ICANN. Albert spoke a lot about that, and they tell you ways in which you can do that. My job is to just reinforce why we need you as part of the advocacy for governance of the internet. If you're in UCC, it is also about the business of education. If you're in the private sector, it is also at the business of e-commerce. If you are in government, it's also about making policy, or policies that actually extend connection and use of it. So for example, you hear about the broadband initiative from Gary Campbell that the government is undertaking. That's all about making sure that each of us have the means to connect to all of us. I hope you take this as a challenge, and I hope to see more of you involved in getting together and becoming members of the Internet Society and participating in the governance of the Internet. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carlton. That was quite a history of ICANN and the development of the internet in Jamaica. Now, I wish to recognize the presence of our esteemed president of the UCC, Professor Colin Giles, and I'd like to invite him to bring greetings.
Good morning, everyone. It is indeed my pleasure to welcome you here today. It is our pleasure to host this very important gathering. The Internet Society is changing the world. The Internet is changing the world. The computer technology is what is driving the revolution in our society today. Young people are at the forefront of it, but they need guidance. And so the experience of those who have been around for a while, we call ourselves technology migrants because we were not born in this era. Many of us, we were born in the days of the rotary dial telephone. And many of us would have seen the first cell phone that they call the fridge. But we have seen in a very short while how things have changed rapidly. Who would have thought years ago that you would have been able to take up your phone and have at your disposal what was previously housed in a large building just at your fingertips, to be able to have a conversation with someone across the globe. All of this is a part of what is changing our world today. And today, as we have our Youth Day, it is a very opportune time for you to be here when many of our young people can have an opportunity to interact with you personally. And I hope that you'll get a chance to interact with them so that they can hear of your experience and see the possibilities that exist. Possibilities for wealth creation. The possibilities are endless. Most of the very wealthy persons in our world today are in technology. And many of these persons are not very old either. It creates opportunities for a new world whereby we are able to connect more easily. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I just want to welcome you here to the University of the Commonwealth Caribbean and hope that you'll have a very inspiring conference for the rest of the day, and that those who come in and participate in our Youth Day activities, even as we continue to celebrate Youth Month, that they will be able to benefit from this experience just of being in the same space where you are. So once again, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you all, and I welcome you to UCC. Unfortunately, I won't be able to stay with you just now because I'm running to another event to bring greetings also. But at the same time, I will be passing by during the course of the day to see more of what you have for us. So I hope you'll enjoy your conference and your interactions. And once again, welcome to the University of the Commonwealth Caribbean. Thank you so much. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Professor Giles. For our audience, for our online audience, it's a pity you're not here in person because we're having the next best thing to popcorn, peanuts. All right, so we're now going to move into our panel discussion entitled Empowering the Caribbean's Digital Future, the Importance of Caribbean Stakeholder Engagement in ICANN Meetings. And I'm going to invite Chanel McPherson, who is a panel moderator on the platform, to introduce the panelists. Is a driver for a silver Toyota Cross 9022JZ here in the lecture theater. 9022JZ? No? Okay.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to ask the persons that are on the panel to just join me on the stage for this discussion, please.
And it was remiss of me not to have introduced Chanel McPherson. She is a third-year student in the University at the University of the Commonwealth Caribbean, UCC. She's in the program Bachelor of Science in Networking with Cybersecurity. She's an ICANN Fellow, And she was this sole country representative as well as for the Caribbean at the ICANN, was it 76? Yes, in Cancun, Mexico, right? And then all right. And then she moved on to Puerto Rico. So please give Chanel, she's a one, this is her first project as an ICANN fellow. So I'm sure she will extend her gratitude to you all. All right? Please give her a round of applause.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Osbourne, for such warm greetings. There's nothing more I could say to top that introduction, so I just won't. Okay, so at the end of this panel, we will have a 15 minutes. You guys okay? Okay. At the end of this panel, we'll have a 15 minutes Q&A session where you get the opportunity to ask our panelists any questions that you may have regarding to this conversation. And so this discussion focuses on empowering the Caribbean's digital future, perspectives from ICANN and regional stakeholders. According to the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, digital transformation, which has to do with the impact of digital technologies and data and their use existing and new digital transformation, which has to do with the impact of digital technologies and data and their use on existing and new activities, accelerating worldwide and affecting all sectors. It offers immense opportunities for economics and societies, yet poses important risks and must be addressed to reap its benefits. The OECD cautions that countries and stakeholders must work together in an evidence-based, whole-of-governance approach to advance a trusted, sustainable, and inclusive digital future. And with that, this panel will bring together key stakeholders from the Caribbean and the digital sector to explore ICANN's role in advancing digital transformation in the region while addressing, mic check, while addressing the diverse challenges faced by Caribbean states. My first question, but first, before I give you the question, I'll introduce the panelists. We have Mr. Albert Daniels, Stakeholder Engagement Senior Manager. We also have on the panel Mr. Rodney Taylor. He is a Is Mr. Rodney Taylor online? He's going to be joining us virtually.
Absolutely.
He's a Secretary General for Caribbean Telecommunication Union. We have Ms. Michelle Marius, Director of ICT Pulse Consulting Limited. We also have Mr. Otis Osbourne. He is the Chairman, ISOC Jamaica, and Head of IT, UCC. And Mr. Rodrigo de la Parra, VP Stakeholder Engagement and Managing Director, Latin America and Caribbean. He represents ICANN, of course. My first question, and if you have the program, you will also see their bio and details. My first question goes to Michelle Marius. She's also joining us online. Michelle, are you with us?
I'm here.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Can we all hear Michelle? No?
Testing, testing. Can you hear me?
Okay, thank you. All right. So, Michelle, our first question is, what are the main priority areas in establishing a robust digital future and ecosystem for Jamaica?
So Nola, I mean, I think we have discussed matters similar to this so many times. And I think therefore I'm going to sort of turn the conversation on its head a little bit, because the question you're asking is something that I think we continually ask, and somehow we don't fully acknowledge and take on board probably all that is required. So, I mean, I can give you some key points in terms of areas that need to be addressed. So, for example, infrastructure, having some sort of framework in terms of the policies, etc. Probably focusing a good time on e-government and facilitating government becoming more digitally transformed, because governments are often the largest employers and procurers of goods and services. So they can have a lot of influence within the population and within the business and private sector. Skills development, so ICT related skills development, trying to foster innovation and entrepreneurship among the business sector, and even looking at ways to increase competitiveness and productivity. And so those are just, things, I think a lot of areas that tend to be covered in many of our policy documents, etc. But what I think I would want to encourage us to really focus on is trying to understand what is a vision that we want to have? What are the outcomes that we want to foster and to realize? Because I think, as we have seen so many times, is that we know the areas that probably ought to be addressed, but what is needed to really drive us to achieve that? And that, I think, is my biggest concern, and that we don't really pay attention and really try to interrogate for ourselves comprehensively what that would mean to create a robust digital ecosystem and fully functional ecosystem. So that, I think, is what at least I would like to emphasize, in addition to just highlighting some of the key areas as you requested. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Michelle, for that insight. And to follow up, we're going to ask Mr. Rodney Taylor. Rodney, are you with us? He's also joining us virtually.
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Thank you, Rodney. So, Rodney, just to follow up with Michelle's statement, what are the main contributions of the CTU with respect to digital transformation and the development and shaping of the ICT sector for our region?
Thank you very much for the question, and thanks for the invitation to participate. And I'm sorry I could not be there in person in Jamaica. Nobody really ever refuses to attend a meeting in Jamaica. But unfortunately, I had to, right, due to other commitments. But CTU, for those who don't know, the Caribbean Telecommunications Union, is based in Trinidad. We are a regional intergovernmental organization, a specialized institution of CARICOM. So CARICOM has several specialized agencies. I think there are about 16, if I remember correctly, focusing on different areas. So there's CARFA, which deals with public health, CARICOM impacts for crime and security. The CTU focuses on information and communications technology. When it was founded in 1989, the main focus was telecommunications policy. And of course, the technology has evolved from pure telecommunications now to digital technologies, much broader. And our main focus is to ensure that there's harmonization of policy, strategies, harmonized infrastructure across the CARICOM member states, so that while we have our national imperatives, while we have countries that are doing really well, pushing really hard on digital transformation, others are following, trying, but that we have a common approach, that each national strategy is guided at the regional level by a regionally agreed strategy and policy. So common legislation around things like cybersecurity, data protection, modern telecommunications, legislation, and so on, we play in that space. We also support implementation at the national level as well. So if there's a national strategy to be developed, national policy, we help our member states in doing that to ensure that they're in line with global best practice. We coordinate regional projects. We've worked with some of our member states in the implementation of subsea fiber cables that connected some of the countries in the OECS. Multi-million-dollar projects funded by the World Bank, but it needed a regional coordination mechanism, and we played that role. We do capacity building. So we host things like the School of Digital Transformation for the Caribbean, which helps our policymakers understand the whole idea behind digital transformation, and that it is not just the implementation of computer systems or applications. It is much wider than that, and it's whole of society, private sector, governments, and civil society. Of course, we do representation within organizations like ICANN. We primarily operate within the Governmental Advisory Committee in ICANN, representing the interests of our member states. Albert presented on all of the issues that ICANN covers, and we do our best to ensure that the Caribbean has a voice within ICANN, not just in the Governmental Advisory Committee where we are, but across the entire community. So we want to see active private sector participation of the technical community, those managers, for example, who manage the country code top-level domains. We want to ensure that they're fully engaged and know what's in the pipeline in terms of policies within ICANN, so that they can impact those or affect those policies. And of course, we keep watch of what's going on within the industry, new developments like artificial intelligence, new technologies like 5G that provide greater scope for connectivity, faster connectivity, lower latency, and so on. The new LEO satellites that are being deployed by the likes of Starlink, Amazon, Kuiper. So we follow those technology trends so that we can help our member states, advise our member states on how we can close connectivity gaps and how we can stay abreast of technological development so that we're not left behind within the global policies with respect to digital transformation. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your feedback, Rodney. And one of CTU's responsibility, as was discussed, was ensuring that different sectors are represented well within these ICANN meetings, and also to get our country code top-level domain administrators and our end users from private sectors, public sectors involved in these meetings so that our voice can be heard at these regional discussions. Now, my next question is for Mr. Albert Daniels. As it regards to ICANN, what are the main goals as it seeks to promote digital transformation within the Caribbean?
Thank you, Chanel. We see ourselves at ICANN as an enabler, a facilitator. We concentrate on ensuring that there is an open, stable, single, and secure internet operating, not for itself, but to drive digital transformation and development in the area of the economy, from a social perspective, and generally in countries. So the idea is that we want to get stakeholders involved and active in making inputs that will drive the digital transformation that we want to see. And when we say stakeholders, we've already mentioned it several times, stakeholders from all of the different sectors. So our main aim really is to bring the knowledge of what is necessary in a structured way to the community so that they understand what they have to do based on what you heard from Carlton. What are the actions that are required from business? What are the actions that are required from end users? How can governments facilitate with policy? and how does that all integrate into the way policy development takes place within the ICANN community. So we feel that there is a lot of opportunity. Business persons, individuals, organizations have a lot to benefit from the internet. However, they need to participate in shaping the kind of internet that will bring that those internet benefits across the board.
Thank you very much, Mr. Daniels, for sharing that. And yes, speaking from my own perspective, going to an ICANN meeting and hearing this discussion, I really and truly believe it is impertinent for everyone that's within this room to get involved in these regional discussions so that we can shape our own internet and its future. So thank you for that, Mr. Daniels. Rodrigo, just to follow up, how does ICANN contribute to the development and maintenance of the internet and digital transformation?
I think it's working now. Thank you. Thank you, Chanel, for the question. I'll try to take some of the elements that Albert has already mentioned. And I would like to just organize some ideas and thoughts about the concept of digital transformation. So, you know, when we think about ICTs, information and communications technologies, particularly the internet and the main goal, it's now being framed into this concept of digital transformation, but it has gone through many evolutions, right? It was really about first building or just having people connected to this magnificent tool, very promising tool that will be transforming our lives. We were not very sure about how, but we knew it will happen. And now I think we still, well, we have more clarity now, but what we do know now, we envision that this is transforming our lives. So digital transformation is really an appropriate term to see what we're targeting now with these new technologies, which are, and I will rescue this, take it from Albert, enabled by this platform or communication platform called the internet, which has a lot of particularities. Within the internet, there is another enabler, which is the domain name system, the system of unique identifiers, IP addresses and domain names. Some people call this the heart of the internet. DNS is like the heart of the internet, an enabler for the internet, because when we talk about the internet, we talk about so many things, even at the technical level. Even at the technical level, we're touching on very different layers of technology. We're talking about ISPs, we're talking about satellite communications, the radio spectrum. We're talking about very different components because actually the internet, as you may know, it's also called the network of networks. So it's actually that. There are many networks that are being now seen as one single and interoperable internet. And this is exactly what ICANN motto is about. We are about one world and one internet, because this is what brings the real power about this communication tool and platform, is realizing the dream, right, of many, of a globe, of a world without borders, a globe without frontiers. This is what is uniting us. The kryptonite of the internet, it's precisely the fragmentation. When we see these threats about the internet that's being fragmented, it's because it's really weakened its potential. It weakens the potential of an entrepreneur here in Kingston, in Jamaica, trying to make business and having the opportunity to reach out to a huge global market, or someone that would like to share their knowledge on any field, literature, they want to show about their writings and the latest book, an idea or a song or something else that is there, which is enabled by the internet. So we should never forget that. So the mission at ICANN hasn't changed over these evolutions. We still have the same one, but I think now we hold an even higher responsibility, which is to keep this technology, this tool, operating in the benefit of all of the things that are happening. I just mentioned some of them, But the domain name system needs to continue to operate in a way that it's, as Albert has mentioned, open, secure, trustworthy, and yeah. So I will leave these reflections on that and perhaps comment further. So thank you.
Thank you, Rodrigo, for your insights on that. But one thing I should say though, in order for this digital transformation within ICANN, within any sector, the CTU, regionally, internationally, there must be some efforts of collaboration with different entities. And Mr. Otis Osbourne, I would like to know, how does ISOC Jamaica contribute to the targets of Jamaica's digital transformation?
Okay, thank you, Chanel. Well, I'm going to speak to Jamaica's Vision 2030 that targets digital transformation. And within that vision, it says that digital transformation will be achieved by leveraging its resources and expertise in promoting an open, accessible, and secure internet for all, which is in alignment with the vision and mission of ISOC Jamaica and ISOC Global overall. Now, when we think about the different areas in which ISOC Jamaica can support the government and other stakeholders in achieving the digital transformation goals, we think about expanding access to internet, universal internet access. And one way we can achieve this, I know that the Universal Access Fund has been doing a lot of work in making internet available in communities through community centers and hotspots throughout in public areas across the highland. And ISOC Jamaica, with the aid of funding from ISOC Global, can help in extending and building community networks. In fact, last December, we donated a Starlink satellite to an early childhood educational institution in Lucy, Hanover. And they're currently connected to the internet. There are students, both students and teachers, as well as community members. They now have access to the internet. They are able to go to this school compound on the weekend and access the internet, or in the evening to access online classes. There's also the area of the opportunity to be involved in advocating for policy reform. And ISOC International has vast experience in policy advocacy. And with that knowledge base, we're able to help Jamaica to shape the policy that is conducive to greater investment in internet infrastructure, especially in the remote areas. There's also the support for digital literacy and education. Schools and universities we can collaborate with in integrating internet governance and digital economy skills into the curricula. Youth engagement, that's another area that ISOC Jamaica could help with. And already there are courses on ISOC Global or international website that all and sundry can take to learn more about the internet, securing the internet, using the internet wisely, also benefiting from the internet. We're able to promote cybersecurity and trust in the digital space. And this is very important because cybersecurity risks are very high. And of course, they are now targeting all the infrastructure across the world. And Jamaica is no different. We are not safe from these actors, threat actors. And therefore, we can bring cybersecurity awareness to users, as well as best practices, both for cybersecurity professionals and institutions, right? And how they can protect their data, use the internet safely, and of course, we talk about as well digital privacy. And one of the things that I want to bring to attention to all participants here is the fact that many organizations are yet to implement DNSSEC, right? In fact, I have been on internet.nl where you can check the security of any URL. And we have some key organizations that are at security risks because they have not implemented DNSSEC. And it's not always although they have implemented, maybe some IPS, right? Intrusion prevention system, or IDS, intrusion detection system. That is not all. That is not all you need to protect yourself on the internet or the organization on the internet. We can also advocate for open standards and innovation. There's the use of AI now, for example, which we can promote. And there's the Internet of Things as well as blockchain. Strengthening digital infrastructure is another area. I know that from my research, the government has been trying to implement a policy of last mile so that the underserved communities can be reached, can get access to the internet, and also benefit from the opportunities that the internet provides. Of course, it would be remiss of me to exclude ICANN's capacity building initiatives as well in the Caribbean. And of course, with the top level domains and the generic top level domains, although we'd want to see domains like .talawa, .onelove, .reggae, what else? Jeremy? Kingston, right? And there's also the case of a part of Jamaica's digital transformation is the creation of smart cities. And I know there's talk about New Kingston becoming a smart city, right? And we're still far off from achieving that goal. But we are here. ISOC Jamaica is ready and willing to collaborate with all stakeholders, both private and public, to help bring Jamaica's digital transformation to fruition. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Osbourne, for those insights. And I just wanted to follow up in regards to your whole collaboration, especially with ICANN. But seeing that you are also the head of our IT department here at UCC, we want to know, what does this collaboration between ISOC Jamaica chapter and ICANN means for students here at UCC, or not just UCC, but students in general within Jamaica?
Okay, ISOC and ICANN share a symbiotic relationship, right? And if we think about it, ICANN's mantra is that one world, one internet. And of course, ISOC, the internet is for everyone, right? Now, collaborations between ISOC and ICANN is forged when we think about strengthening internet governance, right? When we talk about promoting open development, evolution, and use of the internet for the benefit of everyone throughout the world. And while ICANN is responsible for managing and coordinating the DNS and ensuring this stable and secure operation of the internet's UIDs, we can help, we can work together to strengthen the internet governance in Jamaica by promoting participation in global internet policy discussions. Of course, there's also digital inclusion and access, and I did mention earlier about capacity building and skill development. We can work closely with ICANN in advancing security awareness and trust and fostering innovation and research. In fact, we have a planned sit down with the executive of UCC regarding how UCC can work with ICANN in fostering innovation and research as it relates to the internet infrastructure, security, and access. Now, how does ICANN, or how does ISOC and ICANN can work to benefit students? There's access to training and certification. In fact, there's a course, Internet Governance, course, certification course on the ISOC Learn platform that once you sign up to become a member, you have access to the same. There are also blockchain certification course, internet security, and so forth. There's also networking opportunities where students can connect with industry leaders, as in this forum. The opportunities there for students to network with individuals not only from ICANN, but from Flow, Digicel, Spectrum, and so forth. There's also internships and job opportunities that can be made available within local universities, mentorship programs, and even job opportunities in the global tech policy. So students are able to access job opportunities remotely as well, working with ISOC, working with ICANN, working with other organizations within the internet ecosystem. We can help in empowering students in digital economy. So when they learn about domain names and the digital infrastructure and governance, students will be better equipped to participate in Jamaica's growing digital economy, whether as entrepreneurs or tech professionals. And then lastly, there's a global perspective where once students are able to, or given, or take the opportunity to collaborate with ISOC and ICANN, they'll be able to understand more how the internet operates on a global scale, as well as giving them broader perspective to help them adapt and strive in the ever-changing digital world.
Thank you for that insight, Mr. Osbourne. And as a student myself, I want to encourage other students from different universities across Jamaica. It starts from us. The discussions at these regional meetings, we know the type of future that we want to design, not for ourselves, but also for the persons that we're surrounded by. So I'm imploring to students, learn about ISOC Jamaica chapter, become a member of ISOC. Also, there are learning courses, as Mr. Osbourne mentioned, that you can learn about ICANN and its responsibility in our internet ecosystem. You don't have to be a technical person to attend an ICANN meeting. There are different sectors. Even end users can attend an ICANN meeting. Just a regular person that's walking on the street. So I'm encouraging everyone to be a part of that discussion.
I wish to add that I did mention the inclusion of ISOC and ICANN in the curricula. We do this at UCC. In fact, our Foundation Computer Information Essentials course, which all university students take, we include ICANN and ISOC webinars. In fact, Albert has been a guest speaker at some of these webinars, and that is how students learn about ISOC and ICANN. And they have to submit a report as part of their assessment. And it is out of this information session on ICANN that Chanel learned more about ICANN and was able to apply to the NextGen program and become today an ICANN fellow.
It has been a journey, and with that journey, there are also challenges, of course. And I already know that ICANN might experience some challenges in getting regional participations at these meetings. Mr. Albert Daniels, would you like to speak to that? What are some of these challenges?
Thank you for that question, Chanel. And of course, I really enjoyed, first of all, speaking to the UCC students. I think I got more emails after that 1 hour session from all of the students who wanted to make sure they passed, that report that they had to write afterwards. But, I think one of the biggest challenges that I've seen with the engagement that we do in the Caribbean is one of prioritization. And I'll explain what I mean. You mentioned, for example, you just donated a Starlink satellite. You mentioned what the government is doing with regard to access. Now, when you get to the international forum, the priority of access may not be such a big one for most of the other people who are attending this ICANN meeting. And so when we from the Caribbean attend these meetings, and we start talking about access, you know, we tend to have a very quiet voice in that kind of environment. And that has a sort of knock-off effect, because when we now come to the Caribbean and say to you, you should come to ICANN, and you look at ICANN and you see, well, they're not really talking about access. Access is important to me, but they're not really talking about that. And the challenge, that one of the big challenges that we have is that disparity with priorities. Even in speaking with business people and government ministers in the Caribbean, you tell them, okay, well, you need to pay attention to what's happening at ICANN. You need to participate. They say, well, you know what? I have to deal with taxation. I have to deal with water. I have to deal with electricity. And you come in and tell me about the GAC. What is this GAC thing? They don't see a lot of the topics being discussed at ICANN as important to them. And as a result, it's a lot of hard work to convince stakeholders, like some of those who are here in the room right now, some of those who are online, that they need to participate and pay attention to what's happening in ICANN. So I think one of our biggest challenges is bringing what's happening at the international stage at ICANN to the community, to the extent that they realize that what's happening there is important enough to them to join in active participation in developing policies, so that when the policies are developed in places like the ICANN ecosystem, they reflect the needs and the concerns of each of our Caribbean territories. And this is something that we talk a lot about with Rodney. Rodney and I, you know, at Rodney at the CTU, and I discuss a lot, how do we get our Caribbean people to participate? And it's a challenge to get them to realize that it's important to participate, because the priorities at the global level have some direct integration with priorities at the local level. So I think that is the biggest challenge that we face in getting people to realize that, okay, the priorities at the global level have some intersection with your local and regional priorities as well.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Daniels. And Rodney, you're still with us online?
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Yeah, so Rodney, you represent the Caribbean Telecommunications Union, and we want to know what it is that the CTU have been doing to encourage more active participation from regional stakeholders across the Caribbean. That's my question for you, Rodney.
Okay, great. Thank you for the question. And Albert will tell you, we've been working with him. He's been, since taking on the responsibility role in ICANN, certainly with respect to our major stakeholders, which are the governments, encouraging member states to sign up to be represented on the GAC, the Governmental Advisory Committee. And that number has increased tremendously. A number of our countries have registered to participate. Now the challenge is active participation and meaningful participation. And that is what we continue to work on. There are practical issues with respect to being in person in an ICANN meeting in Rwanda, in Istanbul, flying from the Caribbean, probably 2 days of travel at X cost for the ticket and accommodation and so on, and convincing a minister, if you're the advisor or representative, that, you know, that 5, 6, 7+ thousand investment is worth it, right? And how does it impact my immediate priorities and so on? So those are the practical considerations. But what we do, we ensure that even if those member states are not able to go, that the CTU is there representing the interests of the member states that we serve. So we brief our member states when we meet with them at our executive council meetings. We invite, certainly ICANN has been a consistent supporter of our events, updating our member states on policies that are being discussed, like the new GTLDs, applicant support programs, you know, public safety, all of these issues that are being discussed. And that helps a lot in getting the message across and identifying why they should be there. In addition, we, within ICANN space in particular, we advocated for, and it was agreed that we would have a space for small island developing states, because as best as we try, we don't have the resources like the United States and Canada and the UK to send large delegations consistently to participate within ICANN meetings, wherever they are in the world. So we want to establish a space. In fact, we have established a space of small island developing states. So it's not just the Caribbean, but our sisters and brothers in the Pacific Islands and elsewhere, so that we meet across the ICANN community. So ICANN has its communities neatly set out, but we see our interaction with ICANN as more than just in the governmental advisory committee. We see it across the technical communities like the GNSO and other communities, so that we bring everyone together and we are up to date on what is happening, what the discussions are taking place across the board, and what the implications are for policy, for government, and so on. Like I mentioned earlier, even for the private sector, how can we get them more involved to see the economic opportunities around new top-level domains and so on. So we've been advocating for that. Clearly, we see the need to broaden the existing pool of experts who attend. So, you know, you can probably count on your hand the people from the Caribbean who are consistent, who have been consistent in participation, who are knowledgeable, the likes of Carlton Samuels, who presented earlier, of course, and others. But we want to broaden that with people like you, for example, you know, to get you more involved, to support your participation. We have a Caribbean ICT Youth Network. And so it's the same issues we're having in terms of participation within ICANN. We have those issues with respect to participation within the International Telecoms Union and other processes like the Global Digital Compact and all of that. All of these things are happening. The American Registry for Internet Numbers, LAC-i, et cetera. So we need to leverage our young people, get them involved at an early stage. So this is a long-term game, right? So you build the capacity, and 5 years from now, you're competent, you're making interventions on behalf of the region, and so on. And of course, women, we also have a network of women. They traditionally have been underrepresented globally within the ICT sector. We also want to ensure that those voices in the Caribbean of our women and our young people are heard, and that will help us to broaden our technical capacity or capacity to participate. So those are some of the things that we are doing to ensure that our member states are adequately engaged. And I want to thank Rodrigo and Albert for the support that they've given. I'm going to thank them and ask them for further support to ensure that what we call underserved regions in ICANN, that we get out of that category as quickly as possible, and that we are well served within the ICANN community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rodney. I believe Albert has a follow-up question.
Yes, I just wanted to mention, I spoke about priorities, and perhaps one of the topics that the countries of the Caribbean can coalesce around is this topic of security, because we all speak about cybersecurity, we all speak about DNS abuse, we all speak about attacks, and you've heard about DNSSEC. And on this trip, we've brought with us our DNSSEC expert, Nicholas Antoniello, with us. And we were very happy. I don't know if you looked across, Mr. Osbourne, when you mentioned DNSSEC and the fact that it has not been implemented. Both Rodrigo and I were smiling from ear to ear, because this is one of our missions, to make the internet a more secure place. And Chanel also has been interested in driving the deployment of technologies like DNSSEC, which in very simple terms makes the internet more secure for day-to-day transactions. So perhaps that is one of the things that we can see from both sides. Okay, so ICANN is talking about DNSSEC, ICANN is talking about security. Let's go and find out, how we can bring that additional layer of security to our regions, even if we're not interested in all of the other things that are spoken about. Perhaps DNSSEC and internet security is something as a region, and Rodney has mentioned this as well, that we can all coalesce around.
Thank you for your feedback, Albert, and thank you, Nicholas, for being here, just for advising us on how we can have this deployment, DNSSEC deployment here in Jamaica. It's a very excited day for us, and we're happy to have you and your team here to discuss matters on DNSSEC. So, Rodrigo, this question I have for you, because you don't just represent the Caribbean, you represent the Latin America as well. And we want to know, are there any any engagements or any impactful lessons that you have learned from these other regions that we can use here to implement or to guide our stakeholders here on how it is that they can participate and become more active in the decision-making process within ICANN?
Thank you for this question. It's actually really interesting because I think for the broader Latin American region and other regions in the world, we've learned a lot actually more from the Caribbean. There are excellent best practices happening here. One of those is, you are of course, and you've been hearing about this term a lot, the Internet Governance Forum and the IGF, right? It has been mentioned. Carlton presented on this working group on Internet governance, which is more or less the predecessor of what became this IGF, no? The Internet Governance Forum. Well, guess, and then after that, well, I don't want to spoil the question, but there have been many regional and national initiatives around IGF. So you have now regional IGFs, national IGFs, and this is where local stakeholders will get together and discuss these kind of things. So which you guess was the first regional IGF in the world? Yes, actually, the mistake was when I said after the IGF. The Caribbean IGF actually is before the global IGF. So this is actually a best practice led by the Caribbean Telecommunications Union. They've been doing a fantastic effort. That is something that can be shared from the Caribbean to the rest of the world. And actually, it did happen. There's a Latin American and Caribbean IGF, which of course happened after the global IGF, and of course the Caribbean IGF as well. But there are many things, and we, in the engagement team for ICANN, we have constant communication about things happening and what best practices can be reproduced in other regions, right? Learn from those that we're hearing. There is one in particular that I think we should explore in the Caribbean and in the Latin American Caribbean in general. It's an Asia Pacific initiative. It's called APIGA. It's the Academy. It's an Asia Pacific Academy for Internet Governance. Asia Pacific Internet Governance Academy. And it's a capacity building effort to help new stakeholders, or all stakeholders, doesn't matter, on how to get involved in all these proceedings dealing with internet governance, not only from a technical perspective, or other perspective, policy as well. And they perform this kind of or drills or models on how you've heard perhaps about the United Nations models. They're very famous across the world. This can be drills about how you can actually prepare people to participate in a multi-stakeholder model. So how can you participate in an ICANN meeting, like this drill across students, things like that. APIGA is a good example that I will just put on the table as one of the things that we can do. But as I said, there are things that we are already learning from the Caribbean for the world.
Thank you for that insight, Rodrigo. Michelle, you're still online with us?
Yes, I am.
Wonderful. So, Michelle, how do you see the average person participating in this regional, robust digital ecosystem?
That, I think, is a bit of a difficult question, because you want to hope that there is sufficient interest by individuals and thus the desire to participate. And I think for the average person, they're happy to use the internet as they can, but don't necessarily recognize that they can influence global policy, regional policy, etc. And so I really wonder whether or not, as is happening through this event and others, that the emphasis really has to be on awareness, increasing just awareness, general awareness, because people just need to know that they have a voice and probably to understand what might be the issues and how it might affect them. And I think in tandem with that, we probably may need to spend some more time on trying to develop and facilitate increased digital literacy, because it is only through, I think, individuals having just a better understanding of the internet and what it is and what are the pitfalls and what are some of the issues that are emerging or being tackled currently, that then they may say, but listen, I have some interest in that, this affects me. And so drive them to become a little bit more involved than what currently obtains. Over to you.
Thank you, Michelle. And with that, I'm sure that we have participants here that are having challenges, that are having difficulties, that would like their voice or perhaps their opinions to be heard, how we can make it better, or how different stakeholders can contribute to our different challenges. And so I'm going to open the floor to our participants, both virtually and persons that are here with us, to ask the panelists questions that you may have. Can I have ushers? Is there any usher here? Okay, all right. So to participate, just by a raise of hand, we'll have an usher take the microphone to wherever you're seated, and then you can ask the panel questions.
Thank you.
You can. So we'll have questions from online participants and also from our participants here. Do we have any questions online, Mr. Osbourne? Not yet? All right.
Yesterday, I saw some persons who asked questions actually get a little token. So I won't tell you what the token is, but I do actually have a small token in my backpack for the first person to ask a question. And that's only valid for 10 seconds. And anybody who's already been involved with ICANN, like Jeremy, these two, they don't qualify. But we'll still take his question.
I'm glad you said that, Albert, because I thought of this question from before you offered the token. And in fact, it's actually related to a point that you raised, which I think is very relevant. And it has to do with the apparent disconnect between what might be perceived as a relatively narrow focus of ICANN. I mean, ICANN's role is extremely important, but strictly speaking, it's very narrowly focused on the unique identifiers of the internet. It's focused on the domain name system and focused on IP addresses. And for a lot of us in small island developing states, the big issue is penetration, access, and cost. That's the big issue. Those are the big issues. Carlton is underscoring that point. Those are the big issues. And it's very difficult to connect the dots for the general user, but also for a lot of policymakers in government, because they're driven by certain imperatives, political, economic, etc. It's very difficult to draw the connection between that kind of focus that ICANN must of necessity have and these issues of penetration, cost, and so on. So I'm agreeing with you, and the question I have, and maybe I'm throwing. Well, let me pose it to both ISOC and ICANN, so that ICANN will have a little bit of company. Notwithstanding the narrow focus specifically of ICANN, does ICANN see any role for itself in addressing those specific issues? I mean, and if so, what is the scope and extent of that?
Yes, thank you very much for the question. And it's actually a very good one, and we have been trying to answer it in many ways and under different context, right? For example, when dealing with our partnership with different organizations that have in their remits a more broader aspect, like the International Telecommunications Union or others that have, let's say, the issue of access, right? In their remit, they reach out to brothers. So what is ICANN role in it? How can we contribute to that? And by reflecting on that, there is a very interesting approach to, let's say access continues to be a great challenge, right? But let's say that we have like this magic wand and we manage to provide broadband access 5G or 6G to every single human being. And we discover that even after the fact that they have been provided with physical access to the internet, they decide not to connect. They say, I don't want to be connected. And one of the reasons why they don't want to be connected is because they don't trust what's happening inside. That would be actually a waste of time and money and all of these things. And we think ICANN has a lot of things to do around the concept of trust. It has to do with security on the internet, right? Of course, our remit dealing with security and the DNS, it's also limited to certain points. But as anything on the internet, it has to do with cooperation and collaboration. So they just brought the issue of DNSSEC, right? It's very important, that contribution, because without that, the DNSSEC, the concept behind it is that whatever it is you're trying to get on the internet is what you get, right? So if I'm trying to get to point A to point B, I actually go connect with point B and actually this point B gets me what I'm looking for without anyone in the middle intervening and making all of this bad stuff. So yeah, I think this is a great example. Security is one of the things, because without that, perhaps we don't have a magic wand. So the trust is one of the things that can also drive access. If we solve some of the structural problems like income and things like that. No? Thank you.
And I do have his token in my hand.
And for ISOC Jamaica, of course, we have had public seminars on data protection, and of course how everyone can monetize their data. All right. We also had training and cybersecurity workshops on the manners actions. Manners, mutually agreed norms for routing security. And initially, I think it was sometime last year that when I first researched whether or not our ISPs have adopted the actions, we saw where there was no mention of flow or cable and wireless or what's the other name? No, cable and wireless has another name. Liberty, right? Right? And Digicel only adopted the Digital Panama, was the only ones who adopted the manners actions. But earlier this year, I recognized that, and I must congratulate Digicel for adopting most, if not all, of the manners actions for the Caribbean. All right? So we're getting somewhere, but a lot more needs to be done. A lot of, making the public aware of these security risks, especially where DNS spoofing is concerned, right? And the need for the implementation of DNSSEC. And our work I'm telling you, it's monumental, but we'll get there little by little.
Can I say a couple of things? I want to reflect on Michelle Marius is there. Hi, Michelle. And she mentioned the end user and how you get people involved.
Right.
And Rodney also talked about engaging people.
Right.
One of the reasons we have a different approach and talk to everybody is because we have a smaller pond to recruit from. And so our strategy is that we have to do the wide cast. So we talk to, in our situation, providers, regulators, administrators, academics, everybody comes together.
Yeah.
And the reason why we ground some of these institutions in TLIs, tertiary level institutions, is that they have a natural breeding ground to recruit. So I am absolutely thrilled and over with someone, for example, like Ms. McPherson here.
Yes.
Because we have a big funnel. We have a lot of people that come in, but because of the requirements for you to stay on task, it really will only leave us a few with voice and ready to do it. First of all, you put in a lot, and the reward is not the way you think it is. There's personal satisfaction that you would have done something that you think is for the public good or the common good, but you don't get any monetary reward from this. And it takes a lot of time and effort. And so our business is always to recruit everywhere we go. So we have to expand this to other TLIs. Yeah. So the idea was to start with UCC, but we have to go to the teachers' colleges. We have to go to NCU. NCU has been part of this. You still have to remember that you have to work with the establishment, and I mean the regulators, and the companies.
And the company, yes.
Most people don't understand.
Definitely,
when we started in 2003, it was Digicel and Cable and Wireless Barbados who gave us the first funding to have an internet forum meeting. Andrew Gorton, who came, and this is now, I'm talking about 2003. That continued until 2010, when Andrew Gorton came from Digicel. And one of the first things that they did was they provided with space for a secretariat when we started ISOC Jamaica. This is a private company, right. But it always comes down to individuals.
Individuals, yes.
And the thing is that you have to go for a lot of them. You fully recognize only a few will stay the course. So for example, Chanel here, and it is Natalie Rose is one of those who stay the course. We have had lots of fellows in Jamaica. We have had lots. I've been involved in every single one of them, but only a couple still remain. So,
and I want you to mention Robert right there beside you, Lancashire.
Well, Robert Lancashire,
I'm telling you,
he has a different, because Robert is a global member of Internet Society.
Yes.
But I had more interest in him because he was helping us to explain the business reason why we're involved. Because he was an academic who was doing the work to show that the internet connection, the connectivity, had a real payback because people were using his content. He was educating the world without people knowing he was doing that. And so that was important to us. But I want to emphasize what Michelle is saying. You have to continue to find ways to inculcate participation. And you have to do things. You have to have, you mentioned Otis having these initiatives, these events, right. Where you go out and talk to people and bring in people. Lots of them in the funnel at the top. Very few will stay the course to the end of the funnel.
That's true.
But that is actually what we have to do. And we start by recognizing that everybody here is going to stay the course. But if we have one Chanel, we have done well. And I want to make sure that everybody understands that. It's not just the numbers, but it's the commitment of the individual to the process and to the action.
Thank you, Carlton, for that. Do we have any questions online? Any other questions from, okay, we have one? Okay. So we have another question from our participant here.
Hi, good afternoon. The only questions that I have is, what exactly are the benefits of having a local domain name in Jamaica at this time?
Okay, so this is a great question, and it's actually like the introduction for the next session, because we'll be going into detail as that. But you will need to understand what do we mean by local domain name. Having a domain name under the .jm is already a local domain name, but the difference is, probably the question is directed at what would be the benefits of having or running a GTLD registry, a generic top-level domain registry for something that could be as the .com, as the .jm, as something new, as the one Otis was suggesting before. And just to answer the question very quickly, there are technical benefits that arise from running your own registry. You own the own security of your zone in the root zone, so that's already beneficial. Depending on your idea, you may also be helping, for example, a business, a brand, maybe enhancing a community, improving tourism in your city, in your region. So there are many benefits around that. But always keep in mind that we're talking here about not a domain name, but rather a registry, running a registry of a generic top-level domain. But we'll talk more about that in a few minutes. So thank you for the question.
Just may I add something? This is Michelle. Rodrigo, I heard your response, but it sounds more like a policy-driven response, and I wondered whether the young lady's question was more pragmatic from a user's perspective. Why is it important? So, and I mean, perhaps I don't know if anybody else wants to take it on. I mean, one of the things, for example, I would think though, but it may not necessarily be as something that we, let's say in Jamaica, emphasize it, is our own sense of identity online. For many businesses in Jamaica, one would probably gravitate to have a .com than having a .jm extension, because we want to be seen as global. We want to be seen as bigger than what we are. And so you may find, though, that the value, though, for us as Jamaicans in probably trying to use the .jm extension more is that we want to be identified as Jamaican businesses. And so that, I think, at least is one response I would like to throw out. And if anybody else probably has anything else to add.
Yes, Michelle, you actually took the word out of my mouth, identity, right? So that we can be identified on the internet as Jamaicans, Jamaican businesses. And I'm sure Jeremy can attest to it that there are not many organizations that adopt the JM. It's only mostly government organizations and institutions, right? In fact, even with ISOC Jamaica, we do have a .jm domain, which we are yet to migrate to.
But I think SG Taylor has his hand up.
Yeah. So, but we'll get there though. We'll get there though. Someone who.
Hi. Good afternoon, everyone. Just a quick public service announcement. The vehicle with license plate number 5607LH, that's 5607LH. It's an orange Honda. You're being asked to step outside for a quick minute. Thank you.
All right.
So, Michelle,
Rodney.
Michelle, let me give
Yes,
you a
go
little-
ahead, Rodney.
Oh, thank you very
Rodney,
much.
wanna go ahead?
Yeah. I just wanted to say that the issue of domain names is really about brands as well and owning your brand. So even if you don't necessarily manage it, you get the economic benefit. So you may get a registry service provider that, is savvy in terms of promoting the brand. Nobody knew maybe 10 years ago how important .ai would be, but that is bringing in significant revenue for Anguilla, tiny Anguilla. Millions of dollars because of the emergence of artificial intelligence. So really, it's about the brand. Online, in a digital space, that brand means a lot. And Jamaica, the name Jamaica itself is a brand. People know about Jamaica. If you say you're from the Caribbean, the first place they ask is, are you from Jamaica? So there's a lot of brand equity that Jamaica has, not just the name Jamaica, but its cultural heritage, like reggae, Rastafari, and so on, that, don't wait for other people to come and monetize it because they have the money. The big tech companies, they buy domains just because they have the money. I think we've been able to advocate for a lowering of the barrier for entry on the new domains. And I think that we ought to take advantage of that and leverage the applicant support program to ensure that we identify and protect the brands. And that's why we're saying we don't want this discussion to just be within the technical community. We want it to be in the business community as well. Thank you.
So I'm going to let Jeremy speak to the .jm in particular, but I'm going to tell you about the policy side. The first time I heard anybody mention that we should be articulated so that every Jamaican have a domain name was actually proposed by Camilla Roan in 2002.
Okay.
Long before Estonia did. There was a policy perspective from an officer of the government of Jamaica that says we give free domain names, and they're still free. And everybody, just like when you get a birth certificate when you're born, we assign a domain name in the .jm to you. That did not go very far. But when you talk about the vision of it, it was long established. We simply have kind of retreated from that position. But in 2002, that was a policy, a perspective that was actually on the table from an officer of the government of Jamaica, just to make sure. And it's all about branding again. And when you see Estonia doing it and giving every citizen a domain name and all that connected to it, but we were talking about digital transformation, and we were talking about the digital society. That's how she articulated it at the time. And Camilla is probably one of those persons never recognized for the work she's done, but I can tell you from day one that that thinking was already inherent in this space here.
Yeah, Carlton, thank you very much. I think the point in response to the question, and in fact it's an intriguing question, because I think it's a question that many CCTLDs, it's posed to within that context because of the high visibility and high impact of what were first the legacy GTLDs, .com, .edu, etc. And the sort of, those were the big gorillas in the domain name space room, so to speak. And now with the opening of the first round of GTLDs, and we're now looking at the second round of GTLDs, that I think has also served to diffuse, in a way, the domain name space, so that the points that both Michelle and Rodney have made, I think are extremely relevant. If you look at it to go directly to the question about what are the advantages of a local domain name. And I'm taking local to mean, in our case, something that's registered under .jm. The issue largely there, as Michelle said, is one about identity. And Rodney, I think, also spoke about branding. And in that context, Jamaica has a huge brand. We have a brand that is we punch, to use the often used phrase, we punch way above our weight category. And that is significant. And let me assure you that there are others who are external to Jamaica, and I'm sure this holds for other countries in the Caribbean, who recognize that fact. So from very early on, the .jm registry took certain protective measures, let me put them that way, let me coin it that way, because you saw people rushing to register Blue Mountain .jm or attempting to register Blue Mountain Coffee.jm. So this whole notion of well-known geographical identifiers, you know that in France, they protect their geographic identifiers. I mean, Bordeaux is not only a wine, it's a region in France, as you know. So, and Champagne. And those kinds of considerations are very significant when persons may choose to register a domain in .gm or in .tt, because there is significant brand impact. So those are the kinds of considerations. A lot of them are marketing oriented, and they're driven by very savvy business considerations. And we as Jamaicans need to understand the kind of connections between what might seem to be a cold, intangible thing, like a domain name, these unique identifiers, domain names and IP addresses, but particularly domain names, and the impact that they have from a point of view of branding and identification. One other thing I will say, because to turn the question a little bit on its head, there's also the notion which has come up as to, is there any distinction made from a technical perspective between domain names registered, the way in which they're resolved? Is there any distinction in the domain name system in the resolution of domain names, whether they're in well-known domain names or lesser well-known domain names? And the answer to that question is no. And some people are quite surprised to understand that the same rules that resolve domains in .com or .us, a lot of people are not aware the USA does have a .us as their CCTLD, but you know, the same way you would resolve a name in .uk, the same structures, the same rules, the same technical processes adhere to resolving a domain name in .bb, .jm, .tt. So once you understand that, and that there's no discrimination in the domain name system, let me put it as boldly as that, a number of the considerations then fall to what are the advantages what are the advantages of having my domain name as a marketing and branding value registered in a specific domain name space.
Hi, if I may, because I'm not sure if you can see me to know that I had my hand up. This is Michelle Marius again, and I appreciate the interventions, but it also then, and I recognize that what the previous speaker was saying about just trying to be stringent with who has access to it. But then I wonder whether or not the pendulum has swung too far, because it probably now makes the process onerous to get a .jm. So while the speaker was talking, the previous speaker was talking, I went and did just a quick search online. And then you'd say to yourself, okay, we have some illustrious institutions here in terms of high schools. such as Jamaica College and Campion College. I just looked at a few examples, and they have .com. And one would say, would it not be to their benefit to have had a .jm extension? And so you just wonder whether or not in holding the .jm extension so close that we have almost diluted the effect that it could have. Over to you.
No, Michelle, thank you very much. And let me just seek to clarify. No, the example I used really had to do with how one might look at things which are potentially geographical indicators because they're so tightly associated with a Jamaican product, for example. But to use the case you just cited, where you may have well-known schools who have chosen to register domain names in .com, what we find is that a number of those schools have also registered in .gm. There's this notion, they just don't use it. There's this notion, I see Albert in agreement. So if you look at our domain name space, you will see a number of Jamaican entities that have registrations in .gm, but there's no property, there's no internet real estate associated with it. They also register in .com, and then they put their internet real estate, so to speak, their websites and their other internet resources, their URLs with .com, because there's this notion that the big players, the big commercial players are in the .com space, and that if my internet property is also sitting in that block, to extend the metaphor, that I am going to be seen in akin to these big internet players. And a lot of this has to do with how do we then market our domain name spaces, and let people know how it actually works. That there's no technical distinction, there's no bias, there's no technical advantage, and that there are in fact advantages to registering in .gm or in .tt simply because of the marketing and branding that might be associated with these particular spaces. The root service system recognizes all of these spaces equally.
Jeremy, I beg to differ about the bias thing, because we have been, you know that Microsoft offers free software to institutions, but because UCC is ucc.edu.jm, it did not recognize UCC as an educational institution. So we have not been, our students always coming to us and saying, hey, I'm telling you, we have not been able to get it.
I can tell you how it works, because I was at the forefront of negotiating with Microsoft for those technologies.
Well, we need to speak then. Because,
let me tell you how it works.
give
Here's the thing, and again, I say it again. These fellas sitting beside me here, we have been in the same team for 20 years. They probably, as the greatest concentration of knowledge about how the internet works in this region. And I'm telling you that without contradiction. When we got to work with Microsoft to get the $1 a year subscription for the entire Microsoft system, I negotiated for the Ministry of Education, and it started at the UWI. We had a system where you had to be a registered educational institution with the University Council of Jamaica to have access to that solution. You either go through the UCJ or through the Ministry of Education. Unless it has changed since we inked that deal, it is not whether or not you are live with a website that says ucc.edu.jm that makes that distinction, Otis. So somebody not telling you what really happens. Let me say another thing about, you talk about the there are institutions in this country, even government entities. I had a big, long to do with PICA about this. They have registered local domain names, but they never make it a web property because there is this idea that a .com gives you an advantage or gives you time to rub shoulders with the big boys. That is what we are trying to overcome. The perception that somehow you are disadvantaged if you had a .jm domain name is not true, but it's in the head. And we've been working for how long to get rid of that, even in government. And Gary is here, Gary is probably listening. I personally have had multiple engagements with government agencies about their domain name. Because even though it is free to register, and we have a process to get them registered, they get it registered and they don't put any web properties under the name. That is a problem of socialization. It is not a technical problem, it is a political problem, and it is a socialization problem.
Okay, thank you for that about UCJ, going through UCJ or the ministry.
Thank you. Yes. All right. So, at this whole, do we have any final questions? Because we are about to close our panel discussion. Okay. All right. So we want to thank our panelists for joining this informative session, and of course our audience who are here with us and those who have joined virtually. Just a quick update. Lunch is going to be served on the second floor in rooms 204. Am I correct? 204 and 205? Yes. So our ushers will take you there right after this session, and we hope to see you in the next. Thank you everyone for joining this panel discussion. It was very informative, and we'll see you soon. Oh, Rodrigo wants to say something before we go.
Just wanted to mention that we will have a discussion on the domain names, the next round, and the applicant support program after lunch. We might be changing the technical session with Nicolas just immediately after lunch, and then saving the best for last to continue this discussion on new generic top-level domains afterwards.
And Jeremy, you can come and collect your token.
All right, this is your opportunity as well, participants, to network with these industry professionals. Have a good lunch, everyone. We'll meet back here in another hour. Let me see.